gods anymore. So what did that do to poor old Demetrius and his fellow silversmiths? Their revenue went. So what did he do? You know what he did? He started a riot. So this is just a good picture of how the world wars against us. How the world wars against God and His kingdom. You know, they're after, just like we talked about at the very beginning, you've got to understand what the world is and what it's about. It's about making money. It's about getting ahead. It's about all these things. And they war against the soul. So Demetrius, he started his own little riot. They almost tore Paul in two that day. And he had to make it play. But you know what God did with it? God ended up putting him up on the stage so he could proclaim the gospel again. It's like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego we talked about this morning. They were thrown into the fiery furnace. Why? So they could demonstrate God's power and His love. And that's what Paul did too. It doesn't mean Paul wasn't ever hurt. he was flogged, he was beaten, he was shipwrecked, he was all these things, but he stayed steadfast. And I always like to say, it doesn't mean he didn't complain. I don't know that he didn't. It's not written that he ever did. But I know he had a war going on from Romans 7. He had the same flesh that you have. And I have. So he had this battle going on as well. It says in Ephesus, I'm going to just read this one more part. And it says about Paul's preaching in Ephesus, Jesus was magnified. So our battle, we have to understand that just like Paul was not against the Ephesians, our battle is not against flesh and blood. We have to understand that. It's so key that you understand that, because if you, thank goodness some of you guys don't watch media, but the ones that do, if you watch it, make sure your flesh stays in check when you're watching it. And you understand that those people have souls. So, because your battle is not against flesh and blood. You can't get spun. If I watch too much media, I'll get spun up. And I'll lose focus. And I'll focus on flesh and blood instead of the spirit. So back to Ephesians chapter 6. We read part of Ephesians chapter 6. It's interesting. But Ephesians chapter 6 starts out this way. It says, children, be obedient to your parents. Isn't that amazing? So Paul put this stuff in order for the Ephesians. Children, be obedient to your parents, for this is well pleasing to the Lord. Fathers, do not anger your children. It's a tough one sometimes, isn't it? If you don't give them what they want. Workers, work like you are working for the Lord and not for man. This is in Ephesians chapter 6. Put a bookmark there, read it later. I challenge you to read it. Bosses, treat your employees well. Pretty simple instructions, right? And then guess what he goes into? He goes into the armor of God, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes that prepared to spread the gospel, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, and a helmet of salvation. To war against what? The devil's schemes. To war. Children, be obedient to your parents. Workers, work like you're working for God Himself. Masters, treat your employees well. Because then he says, put on all these things so that you can war against the devil's schemes, the principalities, the powers, and the rulers of this evil. There's all kinds of battles going on around us right now. All kinds of spiritual battles going on. You can't see them, but I promise you they're there. Go ahead and go to the next one here. For our struggles is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. 6:13, I don't have it up here. It says this. When the day of evil comes. When the day of evil comes. It doesn't say it may or may not come. It says when it comes. Because it will come. And what does it look like? I'm not even going to put an image to it in your head. But just know the day of evil will come. And you, each one of you, and your families need to be prepared spiritually. So, what are we to proclaim? The gospel, the good news. That's your message and that's my message. That Jesus came down to earth. You can come on, Trip. He came down to earth, bore our sins on the cross. He died. He was resurrected by God's power. He sent his Spirit into you and I, who've been born again, so that we might have this super abundant life. And the same, I always like to say this, the same power that raised Jesus, who was very dead, that raised him to life, is at work in you and I. So you can't say you're powerless at all. You can't say you're not equipped at all, because I just read all the equipment he's given you. If you're following him and trusting him, he's given you everything you need for life and godliness in this present age. Everything. You lack nothing. So, do I have one more slide? Let me just see real quick. Yeah. So we have the basic understanding of the world and how you view the world. You have to know that. You have to know how to view the world properly. What's going on in the world, your community, your family, like I talked about, however big your circle is, your circle of influence. And then boldly, and I put this on purpose because this is for me more than you guys, not arrogantly, speak the truth in love. Be prepared to give the gospel. Be prepared to tell people the truth. Amen?
Amen.
You guys can stand with us. I actually didn't even know what Brian was going to preach on this morning, but I sense in my spirit that this song is appropriate for all of us, the one that we already playing. It's very simple. And I want us to sing it together and remember that through all of this, turning our eyes to Jesus is always the answer. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Let's sing it one more time. Turn our eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. Father, thank you for what we've heard this morning, Lord. I pray that we would take it to heart, Lord, and truly be the light to this generation. I pray that you do that work in our hearts, and I thank you for what we've heard, Lord. I pray we would meditate on it this week and as we go into the future. We just thank you for your word, thank you for your love. In Jesus' name.